Wait till you see this. So now you're starting to make excuses, huh?
No, they're temperamental sometimes.
1914.
You don't.
How are the brakes on this thing?
Well,
I can see the brake mechanism here.
There's two of them there, an inside and an outside, and even together they're not much good.
And you don't have a front brake.
No.
They did not have. That was about 1929 before they started putting front brakes on motorcycles.
Mike is the first, he made me put the two on the back, and that was only a year ago.
Yeah.
I've been across country 6 times with one brake.
You've driven this thing across country 6 times? 6 times you've
Yeah.
Oh my God.
This will be
1914.
the 7th time.
Good Lord. That's a 110-year-old motorcycle that he has driven cross country 6 times, and he's starting his 7th trip. I am impressed.
The run always starts on the East Coast, so he always has it trucked, shipped back to the East Coast to start, and then rides this road.
And these are your headlights.
Yeah,
I'm glad you got
that's
something
to warn
there.
little old ladies not to run in front of me, coming out of a driveway or whatever.
What is this, like a stabilizer? For the that's just for the fender. Okay. No front brakes at all.
No.
And you've owned this for 50 years.
Yeah. I can't remember the exact year. I think it was 72, but I'm not sure.
Yeah,
I'm a bit sloppy.
72.
Sometimes.
I like your little grease. Did that come
Well,
stock?
that's to pump oil into the crankcase.
Okay. Do you have to do that frequently?
Well, yeah. Well, you change the oil. You dump it after about 80 miles out of the crankcase, and then you put
It's not circulating.
Really?
Oil goes into the crankcase; it just stays there.
I can see you're dripping a lot of oil there too.
Yeah, it blows it out of a breather. At least you know it's got enough oil.
Is that what you keep in the side bags? Extra oil?
Yeah. Okay. We're going to see.
All right. I want to hear this thing. I want to hear this thing start.
Where do you live?
Just down the road a bit.
Hotter than the son of a gun, eh? No guarantees it'll start though.
Well, we've never left it somewhere. It always starts. It just doesn't.
In fact, we've got a downhill. You try to park on a uphill. It's just top of the hill.
It's trying to start.
Well, almost.
How many miles do you do it today?
This will be 180 by the time we get home.
Oh, I think it'll be more.
Yeah, it's going to be a little over that for him.
The chain is spinning.
Oh, the clutch is in the back wheel.
Oh shoot! I'm gonna bump start it. Alice's restaurant.
He's got backup.
We had an interesting client. He had this fairly large coast live oak, Quercus agrifolia, in his backyard. And 4 years previous to this, he built his mansion. Quite the structure. It was a very, very interesting property. I'm sure he spent a hell of a lot of money building this. And there were so many interesting things about this property, and I'll talk about that in a bit. But the client really wanted me to look at all the possible problems, like that staining up there on the tree. So I want you to pay attention to this fence. The wood that completely surrounds this guy's property is old growth redwood. Tight grain, no knots, vertical growth, almost impossible to find. And he used it to build this fence. And these are 2x4s around the entirety of his property. I didn't know what to say. You know, it was just such a rare wood. And there's the tree in the background. Fortunately, the power company did do some clearing because when I did the bid, the branches were hanging on the wires, so the tree was hot. Anytime you have a tree that is in contact, you must be very, very careful and get it taken care of. So I really appreciated the landscape. There were some beautiful plants, but many of his plants were so overdone that he has no idea what his property is going to look like in just even a few years. He put 4 trees where there should be 1. 2 extremely beautiful, very expensive, large Japanese maples. This is a persimmon, and there was also a pomegranate. Here's the wood. I want you to look at this. I don't know where he even found this stuff. It is so rare. I mean, you can't just go to any lumber yard and buy this stuff. He must have had it specially milled someplace. In the front of his house, it was unbelievable. Look at that. It goes all the way into his backyard, all the way around his whole property. You know I'm a wood guy, but this seems like an excessive use of a really valuable timber. Now, the tree had been pruned before they built the house sometime in the past, and you can see that the previous tree workers used spurs to climb the tree, which is never a good sign. Whenever you see spur marks on a tree, you can expect a lot of bad cuts. There was quite a buildup on his roof. Yeah. And there was a lot of stubs left over from previous tree trimmers. And this was throughout the whole tree. The one thing that I did notice is there was a lot of dieback up here. And the client wanted to know what's going on with this tree. Why is it starting to decline? And I kind of sheepishly said, well, somebody put a house on top of its root system. You know, you cut all the roots, and this house had a significant basement. I mean, a 3,700 square foot basement, and it went down 15 feet. So you do that much damage. Plus, all of the neighboring properties had swimming pools. So you have to remember, this tree is quite old, quite significant. And everybody that bought properties around this tree developed. They put holes in the ground, they dug, they did trenching, they did everything that it takes to put a residence in the tree's root zone. So I did the climbing on this tree, and I started in the very center because I wanted the highest rope-in point, and I got that part all cleaned out from all the dead wood. But we had some primary objectives that we were trying to achieve, which was all the wood that was hanging over his house had to be lifted up. There was an old cable up here that obviously was ineffective, and it snapped a long, long time ago. It was far too low. There was a heat sink area from his air conditioning units, which made it just unbearably hot to work. The heat that was coming out of this area was going right up into the tree. And it made me stop and think about the effects of the heat from their air conditioner into this funneling area. Maybe that was part of the problem. There's some more of that wood. Working through this gate, this is where we had to take all of the brush. Working through that gate, I could not scratch anything. And with this bamboo and those bars, and you can imagine how hard it was bringing branches through here. Everything hung up. Everything was getting caught. And there was rocks underneath, and they were getting dragged out. So Jorge got up there after lunch, and we did some pretty heavy roping and deadwooding. He is pretty good with the pole saw, so I let him hang up there for a while, pulling out some of the deadwood that was hanging over the neighbor's property. This job was just so hard. There was a before and after of the cleanup, and that in itself was a job. It was a nightmare. Everything about this job really, really, what's the word I'm looking for? Sucked.